Hi there. Welcome to livingthegoodlifepodcast.com. I'm Steve Cass.
And I'm Deb Moraes, and together we are happy to welcome both to the state and to the show, Melissa Cherney. She is new to the Rhode Island Food Bank, but Rhode Island Food Bank is not actually new to us. I think we interviewed, who was it? Was it Bernie Boudreau many years ago, I think, Cass? Do you remember that?
Yes.
I think so. So Melissa, welcome. We're happy to
Thank
have
you.
CEO, and tell us a little bit about you, because we just started reading about it in the journal. So you have a very interesting background. You're not from these parts, as we understand.
I am not. I just finished up week 8 as a new Rhode Islander, and I am from North Dakota. So I moved here from Fargo, but was born and raised on a farm in the central part of North Dakota. So come from a very large geographic state to a very small geographic state. And I love that I can travel everywhere within an hour versus like 6 hours. It's so great.
It's funny to think about, well, as we should say, Melissa is new to Food Bank in Rhode Island, but not new to Food Bank because you had, I think it was 10 years out in Fargo, which must have been very interesting if you were making deliveries. I can't imagine what that's like relative to what you're dealing with here. What's that like, Melissa?
Yes. So I spent 18 years at the Great Plains Food Bank. And so they served all of North Dakota. We had a main primary warehouse in Fargo, which is on the Minnesota border. So we were more of a trucking company and a logistics company as much as we were a food bank. And so we were shipping food, 8 hours one way. Our truck drivers would spend the night in their truck or in a hotel, and then they would come back and refill and go and do it all over again. So yeah, food banking is not new to me, but it's definitely a different environment in which we're doing the work. That's for sure.
Neat.
Now, you may be the only director ever for our food bank who actually grew up hungry. Tell us about
It
that.
might be, yeah. And I've been telling my story. So my family grew up on a farm, and my dad farmed with my uncle and my grandpa. And when you farm things like wheat and, corn and sunflowers and barley, you're so dependent on the weather for your income. And so when we had a tough year, I would be a free lunch kid. And I would also be the kid where my parents would send us over to grandma's house. And at the time, we just thought grandma was a much better cook than my mom. So we had no idea it was because we didn't have enough food in the house. And so I didn't know that growing up, but my parents had told me much later in life. And then it actually it happens again when I was in college. I was on food stamps. And so I was on the SNAP program for a short amount of time. And it was because, when we lost the family farm my senior year of high school. And it was at that point I went off to college, and then my brother did. And I had to pay my own tuition and books and all of the expenses, and I couldn't afford the meal plan. And so I'd worked all 4 years of college, but that year in particular, my junior year, I got a job at our catering department, and partly because I knew I would get a meal at the end of the night. And then I also applied for SNAP, and I was on SNAP for just 3 months, but it was that ability to be able to know that I had food in my fridge and in my cupboards, that I knew I could get up and I could go to class and I would get a meal while I was working, and I could go home and do my homework and then do it all over again. And so it was just a short time that I was on it, but I will tell you that is a very humbling experience. And coming to this work, having been in that situation, I think is rather unique. And so when I am talking to people, I can say, I know what it feels like because I've been in your shoes.
We always thought that when it comes to the Rhode Island Food Bank or any food bank, giving it's a gift to be able to do that. But the person on the receiving side often feels shame, sensitive, all kinds of things. Obviously, you can empathize with that, and I'm sure that's wonderful when you're handling or working one-on-one and when you work with your staff. Do you find that there's still a stigma with that? And how do you overcome that while you're also doing the work of the work, so to speak?
Yeah. Yeah, there is still a stigma. I mean, I think we as people are very prideful, and it's hard to sort of swallow your pride and admit that you need help. And, I think the best thing we can do is provide great customer service, because that's what we're here to do. We are here to make sure that people have food on their tables, and they are allowing us to do our work. And so just reminding them, I think also that this isn't necessarily a reflection or a characteristic of who they are, but it's a circumstance that they're in. And if we can just help them get through this, we can lift them up, we can help them thrive, get them through this really tough moment. And it's all about treating them as people and with dignity, because they are no different than you and me. As you saw in the Providence Journal, I was that person. I was. So I know what that feels like. And I was very thankful that no one made me feel uncomfortable or different because I needed help.
That's a good point. That is good to know. Steve, you were going to say something and I was about to
I
jump
was
in.
about to, I was just saying that, I always thought that in order to get food from the food bank, you had to go there and pick it up yourself. But reading that story in the Projo, there are many more than one location where people can go and be served by the food bank with various branch operations. Tell us about that.
Yes. And so actually, when food banks were set up, they were set up as sort of distribution hubs that would get surplus food from all over different retailers, different farmers, growers, manufacturers, and they would bring it into a central warehouse, and then they would get it out to all of the food pantries and meal sites in the area. And so that's how it really was set up, and it still operates that way. And so we bring about 18 million pounds of food in every year. As soon as it hits our warehouse, it goes on an online inventory system, and then 137 food pantries and meal sites can place an order, just like you would place an order for your groceries online, and they'll either come and pick up that order or we'll deliver it to them. And then anyone who needs the services can go to any one of those 137 that's close to them to pick up the food.
That's quite an outreach for our little.
It is.
Oh my
It
God.
is. 137 is a lot in a very small geographic area, which is good. It means people don't have to travel that far to go get food assistance.
So I'm concerned, well, in the news, everyone knows that the amount of people who might be having new need of it's growing. I understand that in direct proportion with, or in opposite proportion, I should say, while the need grows, the supply is dwindling. How are you managing that right now, Melissa?
It's really hard. We have, I think we all expected after COVID that our numbers would go back down, because they really did peak during COVID, and they haven't, for, a number of reasons. But what has been most interesting is food banks typically rely on donated food. And one of the things that we saw come out of COVID is manufacturers got very efficient. So they're doing just-in-time inventory. They're maybe not producing as many varieties of canned vegetables as they used to. They've just really shored up their processes a little bit. And so that means less donated food to us. And it's a challenge. I will tell you that right now. We are purchasing food, which was not a typical food bank model. And so we are raising dollars and purchasing food by the truckload, which we are able to get, a fairly good deal when you buy in those quantities. But our old food banking days of hoping for, donated cans and donated boxes of product is just not the case anymore. We're actually having to either purchase it, and we're stuck in this spot where we've got more people and less food. And so it means people are probably getting less quantities than they used to and less variety than they used to.
So could you speak to that a little bit? I know that we've known of opportunities to go deliver food to your food bank, but you have, talk to us a bit about your programs and how people who may be hearing this can help and how that works for you now.
Absolutely. So, we are always looking for food donations. It's a great opportunity right now around the holiday season to do a food drive. whether it's in your family, your church, your community. And you can donate that either to the food bank or to your local food pantry. And then there's also funds. You can, if you donate $1, we're able to spread that pretty far because we're able to get some really good pricing on product. And then I'll tell you, all 137 agencies need volunteers. And so if you can donate your time, that is probably the most precious gift that you can give and help pass that food out to people in need. And I think that is really where you get to see the need firsthand, because hunger really hides in plain sight. You can't look at someone and see that they're hungry. But if you volunteer and you give back, you're going to see that it's community members who look like you and me. It's working families with kids, it's grandparents, it's seniors. It's just everyone who's really in a tough spot right now.
Tell us about those programs. I didn't know there was one that I hadn't even heard. I know about SNAP. Please give us an update about that.
Oh, yes.
The other one was a senior food box. And I understand
Yes.
we've never heard of that. I'm sure many of our viewers, listeners haven't either. Give us an update on that, Melissa.
Absolutely. So our senior food box program is actually run through USDA. So it is a commodity program where the federal government sends food banks and different entities across all 50 states, commodity foods that are packed up who are given out to low-income seniors. And so seniors have to income qualify and they have to apply for the program. And if they're interested, they can reach out to us at the food bank and we can help them get that application and paperwork. And then they are given a box of food every single month. And they can pick that up at a number of different locations across Rhode Island. And that is a program that honestly, we have a very long waiting list for, which is unfortunate. We're serving about 2,000 seniors right now, and there's a waiting list of about 800.
Oh my gosh.
So there's more need than there is food at this point, which is unfortunate. But we continue to do the best with everything that we've got. And then you also mentioned the SNAP program. And that is, yeah, exactly what I was on in college. And that is an income-based federal nutrition program where if you and your household qualify, you would be able to get, it's like a little debit card that you can go and use those dollars at your local grocery store to purchase exactly what your family wants, what your family can eat. And the great thing about that is that you're reinvesting back into our local economy, into those local grocery stores as well.
Good point.
Well, Melissa, when, right now, I'm sure you have I think you said in the journal story that you're seeing lots of people who are coming into the food offer looking for food has
Yes.
increased dramatically. And if you read the economic news, where we may be headed toward another period where that may increase even more. Let's hope that doesn't happen, but it might. How are you prepared to deal with that?
I would say, and can you still hear me? Is that okay?
Yes.
Notice my headphones died, but it's, I will say food banks are really designed and set up to respond to crisis and disaster. That's what we're here to do. And so for us, this honestly, as devastating as it will be, it's nothing new for us because we've been through this before. What are we preparing to do? We are always thinking about 6 months in advance, thinking through what product do we know we have coming in. We're always looking to every week, looking to see what our numbers look like across the state. Where are they increasing? Where are some fluctuations? And we're preparing and doing the best that we can. We're always searching for the best price on food, the best types of food that we know that our neighbors need. But I'll tell you, it's going to be tough. And I wish I had a clear answer for you. I don't. I just know that we've been through it before and we've got processes in place and are always thinking about how do we prepare for the worst and then hope for the best.
Wow.
I had just looked at your website a short time ago, and I'm familiar with 211, and I think
Yes.
you should talk a little bit about that. what I didn't know is how 211 is helpful and connected to food bank, and perhaps you
It
can share
is.
that, please, too.
Absolutely. So 211 is a really great service where if anyone needs to find any resource possible or any benefit, you can call and you'll get a live person who will actually talk with you and refer you to the right places. And so if you are in need of food, they're going to connect you with your local food pantry. They'll connect you with SNAP. They'll connect you to any of those resources that they've got available. And when we have 137 different entities across the state, there's bound to be one in your neighborhood that can help you out pretty quickly.
That sounds good.
Now, you also have, in this state, we have, I don't know how many different nationalities living in Rhode Island, but it's enormous.
It is.
And how do you cope with that? Because obviously people come from another world, and they
Yes,
eat different foods than we do, obviously, and probably they eat healthier than we do,
they
but
might.
they might. How do you keep up with that?
You know, that's a great question. And that is something I guess I'm very proud of the food bank here for doing. They do a lot of focus groups and a lot of surveys working with different nationalities and asking them, what are the foods that your family knows how to prepare? What is traditional for you? What are you going to eat? Because when we have a mission of ending hunger, and let's say you are diabetic and I hand you an entire box full of high sugar, high sodium food, I didn't help end hunger for you. And so we really have to get personal and make sure that we're giving people the right foods that their family will eat, that they can eat, and that are healthy for them. And so when we're doing these focus groups and taking these surveys, we're listening to what they need and what they want. And then we're actually using some of our dollars to purchase those foods. They might be a little more costly, but in the long run, we know that that's nutrition that's getting into their bodies, it's getting onto their tables, and it's actually feeding those families. And so it requires us to purchase a little differently. It requires us to listen to the people that we serve in new ways. And it requires our staff to really adapt and find new ways of doing things. But that, I think, when you have a staff that is so passionate about not just giving people food, but giving them the right food, to making sure that we actually helped them in some way, that's pretty powerful.
Could you continue? I was going to ask the same question. So Cass and I have been working together so long. I'm not surprised that he was doing that question right then and there. So continuing that a little bit, because I saw that you have educational resources and they're available in English and Spanish. I didn't do a deep dive in that. That's part one. Can you explain what that is? And my other question is, what about people who want to adapt, don't know that they should adapt their or change their eating habits? Do you have a way to help educate people about how to eat what grows here and not always the same things that they had in another country or another place or another time? Because you want them to not just eat, but eat well. And that is a little bit, I think that's got to be a big question that others have too. Could you address that?
So we have a program called Healthy Habits, and what it is, it's more of a nutrition education arm. And so we are going out and we are teaching, whether it's children, it can be families, it can be single adults, it could be seniors. We're going around to different community partners and working to teach healthy eating. What are good foods to eat? And really we have this philosophy that no food is bad. Every food in moderation is okay. But really, how do we start to nudge them toward eating a little healthier? And by introducing those foods to them, showing them how they taste, letting them actually taste it, letting them cook with it, sending it home with them so they've got the recipe and the food and they know what to do with it once they get home, is pretty powerful. And I think all of that plays in when you're working with, different nationalities and different languages. We are working to make sure that all of our materials are both in English and Spanish, but they also have a lot of pictures. And so even if you don't speak English or Spanish, you could look at the pictures and you could still make the meal. And we are working with translators, and they'll be on site if needed, or if we need to translate into a different language, we're happy to do that. But it really is an opportunity for us. And I think this goes beyond just providing food, is providing that nutrition education of where do you find what you need? What does grow here? What are you used to? What might you find here that's a little different that you might incorporate? And how do we get them to start thinking a little bit more holistically about what they're eating and incorporating what Rhode Island has to offer?
That's really encouraging. I know I heard on, I think it was one of the network 6 p.m. news things that people often will go to buy fast food because it's less expensive. So when I heard that, I thought that was really a shocking thing to hear. Can you correct that? Because in my mind, I don't know, but I think if you buy a chicken, you stick it in the pot and boil it, that you get 4 meals out of it, 3 meals, 2 meals, whatever. And it's more nutritious than 4 chicken fingers. And I don't have anything against chicken fingers. Right. Can you address that? Because that seemed like a very peculiar statement. And you're so I'm so happy to hear that you're so committed to educating people. It makes such a difference.
That goes to, it's twofold. I mean, if you think about, the dollar menu at fast food restaurants, you get a large quantity of not necessarily healthy food for a low price. But the other thing that plays into that is the time. If you've got working families who are coming home and they don't have time to cook a meal from scratch, oftentimes it's just easier to go through the drive-through or pick up something cheaper and make that because it's quick and easy. So I think what we need to do is really educate that there are other options out there. And once we teach them, if you teach someone how to cook from scratch, they get used to that and it doesn't take as long. And I will say I'm the guiltiest person in the world. I used to think cooking from scratch would take me hours. And now that I've started doing it, I'm more comfortable doing it and it doesn't take as long. And so I think that's one of the important pieces that we offer, and, that we offer it to people who are ready to hear it. Not everyone is in a place in their life where they maybe have the ability to cook. They may not have all of the equipment to cook, but when they are there, we are there to help them.
Gee, it sure sounds like you already are and are going to continue to be a terrific advocate for healthy eating, but specifically for the Rhode Island Food Bank. It's just terrific. I'm so glad we got to talk to you today. Oh,
gosh, this has been so great.
Tell everyone the website where they can go to get help or give help.
Absolutely. So it's great. There's just one website. It's rifoodbank.org. So rhodeislandfoodbank.org. You can find out all 137 local agencies that you can support. If you also need support, you can find them on there as well.
That's terrific.
If you're just joining us, I'd like to let you know that our guest is Melissa Cherney. She's the new CEO of the Rhode Island Community Food Bank, and she comes from a very large state. Matter of fact, you put Rhode Island there probably 100 times. I don't know.
Probably.
And I tell you, I am so impressed with you.
Thank you.
I mean, we sometimes get very critical of our government here in the state, but you are a terrific new asset that we have, and I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Well, it was wonderful to get to know you too. I appreciate this opportunity.
We wish you the best. Thank you so much for your time, and we're happy to share the good news of you and Rhode Island Food Bank. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye, Melissa. Bye-bye.
Bye, Melissa.
And next up, we're so happy to have in this segment a good friend of ours, none other than Bill George, who we've known for a very long time. Bill I guess I first met Bill when he was on air, but he's certainly had something like 30 years of experience. I guess maybe he started when he was 2 or 3, from being on air, being in management. I think I remember him being a PD, a public affairs person, a news director. So he's been a personality and also behind the scenes. And now in his latest iteration, he works for all of us who end up being in broadcasting as executive director of the Rhode Island Broadcasters Association. And so Cass and I are so happy to welcome and say hello to Bill George. Hi, Bill. How are you?
Good. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you. Oh, wait a minute. One important thing that I didn't mention. So we recently saw Bill, very important to mention, Bill, as well as Cass, Rhode Island Radio Hall of Fame, but actually it's Rhode Island now Broadcasters Hall of Fame. Both are members. Bill, more recently, I think it was 2016. Was that it, Bill?
Yes, yeah, I was inducted. Yep.
I did my homework. So we're so happy to have you here. My goodness, so much to talk about.
It's my pleasure.
I think one of the things that people have been talking about, and there's so much that you are involved with that our listeners won't know about, but can you tell us a little bit about the update? Tell us about the story, set it up about AM and keeping AM in car radios. Everybody says, I got a phone. What do you say to that?
Well, the AM for Every Vehicle Act is a piece of legislation that has been introduced several times now in Congress, and it is the top legislative priority for all broadcast associations. So we work closely with all the broadcast associations around the country, and for both at the state level and with the National Association of Broadcasters, it really is our top priority. What the bill basically says is that it would mandate that auto manufacturers keep AM radio in vehicles. And there's been a movement away from that. So for a couple of reasons. Number one is that the auto manufacturers, as they make more electric vehicles, as you know, anybody who's listened to AM radio and driven under power lines, you know that electricity and AM radio don't always go well together. However, there are ways for auto manufacturers to mitigate it. They in some cases just don't want to do that. It costs them a little bit of money, obviously, to install the technology. The other reason is the dashboard is changing. And what we're going to see in the future is a subscription-based dashboard. So all of your dashboard is basically becoming real estate at this point. So if you want to have the cold weather package that heats up your steering wheel and your seat, that's going to be a subscription as opposed to just an option that you buy on your car. So as you start to get more and more entertainment options on the dashboard, you're going to see the auto manufacturers bring in more and more options. AM and FM radio don't cost anything. They can't make any money off AM, FM radio. So that's another reason that some of the auto manufacturers are fighting this bill. Now, right now, what's happened is that the bill actually just passed in a House committee. So it went through the Commerce Committee in the U.S. House, and we are waiting for it to be scheduled for a vote in the House. It has over 300 co-sponsors in the House, and it has over 60 co-sponsors in the Senate. So we're hoping that this is going to be the year that we finally get this bill passed.
Why
Have you talked to President Trump about it? Because I interviewed
Not
him
directly.
many times when he was a real estate executive on AM radio. And he's not doing as many interviews with the likes of me these days, but he might be sympathetic. Anyone, have you given, you want me to give him a call?
Yeah, absolutely. Get him on the, get him on the
You've got his number.
I do.
Why would any legislators oppose this? I mean, I can understand now what you're saying, and I think our listeners will too, why car manufacturers have stopped in some cases doing this, and why they might want to. It's an expense, as you're saying, and they're not making money on it. Why would any of the legislators oppose this when it will only help their constituents? How does that work?
If you are a legislator in a district where they make cars, that would be someone that may not endorse it.
Yeah.
But again, we have 300 sponsors out of 435 members of the House. So that's not the issue. The only issue here is just getting it to a floor vote. And at this time, it's just Washington is very chaotic. Unfortunately, I first learned how a bill gets passed by watching Schoolhouse Rock on Saturday morning cartoons.
Yes.
Of a bill on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's not that simple. So it gets voted out of committee, and then it has to get voted onto the floor. But it is leadership that decides what is going to get voted on. And right now, there is a real logjam in Washington. As we record this right now, we're in the middle of a shutdown of the government because the two sides can't work together to resolve that. So unfortunately, the AM radio bill is just not a top priority So the deck has to get cleared of some other legislation before we even get to that. And I will say also that our Rhode Island delegation, we have 100% support. So both of our congressmen and both of our senators have signed on as co-sponsors of this bill. They did it in this Congress and they did it in the previous Congress.
That's good to know. You know, it's interesting. You mentioned rightly so the issue about cost, but when it comes to ensuring the safety of people, this should be a, as they say, the no-brainer, as opposed to whether or not my dashboard can show video or something.
Right.
I can appreciate that if you have a kid in the back seat. However, when it comes to concerns that people may have when they're on the road, that I would think that should be something that would be reflexive on their part. Just, you know.
Yes. The safety issue is paramount. This isn't just about picking winners and favoring the broadcast industry over the automotive industry. What this is about is a public safety issue. Number one, AM radio is the backbone of the emergency alert system. The argument against that, and not only auto manufacturers, but also the consumer technology industry is against this bill. And recently they did research to say that 95% of people who receive emergency alerts do get them on their phone. Well, that's great when everything works. However, we've seen countless examples. We saw the floods in Texas recently. We saw the wildfires in California. We saw hurricanes in the Southeast. The cell service is one of the first things that gets knocked out. Once your cell service is out, AM and FM radio are the only way that you can get information. And there's countless case studies of this, in Western North Carolina, where they don't get hurricanes. It's too far inland. They were devastated earlier this year. And there are all these stories about folks that the only way they knew what was going on when relief was coming, what was happening with the storm, whether or not their family members were safe, was through AM radio and FM radio. So radio really is important for public safety, and just about over 80% of the population still listens to AM FM radio on a weekly basis.
So, true confession here, even though we have all the phones and the iPads and all the rest of this paraphernalia, we still have a radio just in case if something else goes wrong. That's been a reliable thing. I don't have it all the time. I keep the batteries out just so I keep them safe or whatever. But when all else fails, that's been something I think I've used. And I don't know how many people even have radios that are separate entities any longer, but it certainly can come in handy. It's an important issue. I'm glad that you addressed that. Do you have anything else you want to say about that, Cass, even?
No, I can just remember how many times in my life that I've done a weather forecast and morning drive on the radio, and I can't even count the number of times we've done it. So,
Yes.
and surprisingly, it was fairly accurate too, even though people complain.
It's a good point, because the other issue is that the information nowadays, you can get information from anywhere. There's 1,000 ways you can get it on your tablet, on your phone. But broadcasters are the only ones who have a responsibility to serve the public. We really have a vested interest in getting it right. If you go to a website that gets something wrong about a weather emergency or anything else that you need to live your life, then there's no accountability on the part of those websites or an app. But broadcasters, as federally licensed entities, have, and our licenses come up for review, so that if we're not operating in the public interest, that's something that becomes a matter of record. And there are stations that can get fined for not operating in the public interest. There are stations that have lost their license for not operating in the public interest. So broadcasters and journalists, and especially local journalists, when you look at trust factor, we see that constantly in research done by all sorts of entities, throughout the advertising community and broadcast community. Even research studies that broadcasters don't sponsor, where you see local radio and television announcers are the folks that they trust the most. Those are the, and so we're not talking about, cable TV or the talk shows, but talking about your local people on the radio and television.
So is this probably a good springboard for you to address other issues that are going on in local radio or local content? There's an issue about what they call protect broadcasters' investment in local content, and you talk about personalities too. Can you make that transition for us? Because I think it's something that our viewers, probably listeners, won't know much about.
Yeah, and that is we could talk all day about that. That is a
Yes.
multifaceted thing. Right now, it is a difficult time for broadcasters because of the fact that if you look at, for instance, in the way that television works these days, television is up against a tremendous number of challenges because you can get a lot of the programming that you find on ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC from the app associated with those networks. So never before has television actually had the kind of competition that they have in some cases from their own networks that they're taking some of their prime programs and putting it onto their apps. So broadcasters are really having a difficult time with that. And that's where the local news and information, the local connection that we see that our stations here do so well, the Rhode Island PBS and ABC 6 and NBC 10 and WPRI 12, it's really the local connection because at some point you're going to be able to get all of the other programming somewhere else. So it's going to be about the community service, the community connection. It's a fascinating time right now because it is moving so fast that you can get everything in a digital world. And as broadcasters, we really see our role as number one, as serving the community, and number two, as content providers. And it's not just about getting it on your TV. Every radio and television station has an X account, has a Facebook account, has an Instagram, has all the digital tools that we need to get our content out to our viewers and listeners. So it's a brand new time. And when you think about how much that has changed in the past 10 years, it's really changed more in the last 10 years than it did probably in the previous 20 or 30 years. So one of the things that we've also asked the FCC to do is to look at the way that broadcast entities are allowed to deal with content providers. A lot of the rules that were written in terms of who broadcast can negotiate with for their content, things like that, were actually written before YouTube existed, before Netflix existed. A lot of these are the laws that were written, in the early 2000s when it was a totally different world.
And address the AI issue. I work with people and try to help them mince and parse and understand what AI generated stuff is. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it doesn't hallucinate like it once did, but it still does. When I think about how people can still trust their local broadcasters, the people that they will see in the supermarket, if that's the situation, they're the trustworthy entities. What about AI's impact on what's going on with all of the platforms now?
You talk about a technology that's moving fast. AI is really incredible. It's so easy, and we all have it embedded right on our computers. I mean, the things that you can do with AI now to create worlds that don't exist, and we've seen this every day in the news. There's something about AI creating content that isn't real. That is going to be a very difficult subject going forward. We have to keep in mind that right now AI technology is the worst it's ever going to be in terms of the quality of what it can do. It's only going to get more advanced where you aren't going to be able to tell the difference between AI. So, it's funny when somebody shows me something AI, just because being in the business, it's a little easier for folks who work in the industry that you could hear an AI voice, voiceovers, things like that. But I will say that it's getting really good. So we're going to get to a really weird time in our country where we're going to need to legislate and have rules against these things. But at the same time, too many rules is not good for free speech. So that's this balancing act that we have to do to keep things to keep people protected from false information, from things like deep fakes and false video and voices and things like that, but at the same time not suppressing free speech. So we're really heading into a wild west of sorts in that realm. And there are AI laws. We actually just in the Rhode Island General Assembly, they just passed a law that we helped the Secretary of State's office write the text for. And basically what that does is it requires that if you use AI in an election ad within 90 days of an election, you have to disclose it on the ad. So you see this all the time, that that maybe it's just the background of a candidate in front of a crowd that didn't really exist. They're actually only in front of 10 people and they show them in front of 1,000 people. If you make an ad like that, you are now required, if you want to run it in the state of Rhode Island, you have to actually disclose that with something on the screen, or in the case of radio, with a disclaimer on it.
And you've heard it first here from Bill George, CEO and executive director of the Rhode Island Broadcasters Association. That's good to know, because I'm not so sure people are so aware of it. They often just consume it, period.
I have a question about that. We know Hollywood now is going through all sorts of aggravation over artificially created actors and actresses. And I don't know whether they have to pay them since they're not real.
Are they SAG-AFTRA?
I don't think so yet, but SAG-AFTRA is worried about getting rid of them. And now there are some radio stations, by the way, God forbid, they're replacing live people with AI people doing radio shows. And of course, owners of radio stations, when they look at the difference in the payroll with the artificial one, guess what? And there are radio stations now that are programming totally made up people with AI, not humans.
And some of them are doing it above board. Some actually have people on the air where they actually, there's one out west in I think Portland maybe, that they call her AI Jen, as in Jennifer.
Jennifer.
And she's a real character. And then there was a station in Australia that actually put an AI person on and didn't tell anyone. And of course there was backlash from that, because no one wants to be fooled. But the Hollywood thing, you're right, Cass. The Hollywood thing is I don't know what's going to happen. The AI is going to do a lot of positive things. I mean, the things that it can create visually for us that didn't exist is just amazing, where you can just sit down at a computer and type in a description of what you want to see and it spits it out. Think about this, Tom Cruise, here he is doing his own stunts on the Mission Impossible movies into his 60s. Well, one day Tom Cruise is going to be in his 70s and then in his 80s. And so will we see Tom Cruise just basically allow the studio to show an AI image? And even if it's not Tom Cruise, pick any other actor, or even an actor that we've never heard of yet, that is going to say, hey, I give you permission to take my likeness, and in scenes where, it's a stunt or it's something crazy, you could just create me out of AI and have that actor do it. That AI generated actor take the place of Tom Cruise driving a motorcycle off a cliff.
Payroll will be less.
Well, that's the scary thing. That's why it is so attractive for companies,
Sure.
for Hollywood, which another industry where the entire model has completely changed. I mean, who would have thought that A-list actors and movie houses are going to create content that people will watch on a laptop. But if you watch the Oscars or the Emmys, you see that so much of what's out there is stuff that's really intended for for the Oscars. It has to go into movie theaters in order to qualify, but it's really being created by a lot of these studios that their business is delivering content digitally.
We understand the importance of saving a buck. We understand money. We understand there's consolidation. And I think this is probably an appropriate time for you to address that too. So we three, I think, were around at a time when a radio station could have one radio station, an AM and an FM, but they couldn't have 3 and 4. And a TV station couldn't have 2 or 3 in the same market. They were absolutely mutually exclusive. You got one and done. Now, we also understand that there are so many M&A mergers and acquisitions everywhere, and everyone's being gobbled up. Speak to how things have changed. I guess they'd call it antiquated now. You folks call it antiquated, about the broadcast ownership rules, because that's another world for people to be aware of that continue.
Yeah, we're seeing a change now. There are very large companies that are looking to merge. Nexstar, which is the largest television operator, they're the folks who own Fox, Providence, and WPRI TV. They are merging with a company called Tegna, which is not here in Rhode Island, but another very big company. And you're going to see a lot more of those mergers. Now, a lot of folks will tell me, and I hear this all the time, especially from radio people. I mean, I came up in radio at a time, as you say, Deb, that you could only have one AM, one FM. So I was the director of operations at Light 105, which was owned by Telemedia in 1993. When they bought WPRO AM and FM, we created what was then, they called it a duopoly. So we had 2 FMs, 2 AMs, and that was brand new. And that was something that really did a lot of things to the broadcast industry, both positive and negative. Now we're at a time where we, as broadcast associations, are actually asking the government to lift the restrictions even more. And the reason is that we need scale. When you look at what our competitors are these days, when we all got into radio and television, it was radio, TV, magazines, and the Providence Journal was the big kahuna.
Yes.
That and the Yellow Pages. Those were your competition for advertising. Now there are thousands and thousands. It is a playing field where we are competing with digital. So as broadcasters, our competition isn't just other broadcasters, it's YouTube. YouTube takes about 15% of the viewing market in Rhode Island. And that is only going to grow, and there will be others, because you do see, we're competing with the Netflix and the Googles of the world. So having larger operations is actually going to help, because it's going to help stations realize economies of scale. It's also going to help them deal with the fact that there is less advertising revenue. A lot more advertising revenue is going to digital media now, as opposed to traditional radio, television, and newspaper. So it is going to be a help. But it is important that these organizations that are doing that do it responsibly, not cut out news staff, not cut out news commitment, but actually reinvest in news commitment. And I think you're going to see that. And it is because, as I said, the local connection, all of these radio and television stations are seeing it now, that you can get music anywhere, you can get funny content anywhere, but you can only get the local connection that we all need from our local broadcasters.
It's good to know. That's encouraging, because, I've been involved in print, broadcast, all my career, all broadcast, obviously, but there has been such a crunch and a squishing down and eliminated posts of people who were creating content, not opinion, but actual news. And when you lose that, you lose an awful lot. So to hear you say that there's a chance that that's going to be king, content being king and journalism being king again, and people will invest in it. And if that merging makes that happen, that would be a very good thing. Also, just to have it offset, AI is generating and scraping whatever it scraped, I guess.
Yeah.
Are we heading into a time when three corporations will own the entire media in the United States?
It's possible, and it's a good question that that I think you could look at that and say, well, that can't be good for anybody. But at the same time, folks have said to me, well, it's much better if a mom and pops owns it. It's a very difficult time for mom and pops operators right now. If you're a small AM radio station selling commercials for for very little money, trying to pay people a living wage in a small, let's say, standalone AM radio station. It's a very difficult time. And for those folks, if they can realize economies of scale by consolidating into larger groups, and I'm not saying conglomerations, but into groups where they can realize economies so that they can actually pay people and continue to do news and cover what's going on at City Hall, because it is difficult for those folks to operate. The small operators are really having a very difficult time, and by merging together with other entities, that actually does help them financially. Hopefully, like I say, you hopefully see them operate responsibly and stay invested in the community.
Are you encouraged? So in this recent Hall of Fame induction, we had Mr. Mendez from Poder, which is a Spanish language. That's a single owned station, is it not?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, Tony. Yeah, Tony. Yeah, I said to Tony at that, and Tony. So we do these. You know, you and I have been to all these, right? And so you know, Cass, you were inducted. I was inducted, and so we've seen all these. And Tony had 9 tables of people come out.
Amazing.
Yeah, where
Amazing.
it was amazing. And afterwards, I went up to say hello to Tony after the ceremony was over, and he was up on the stage, and I had to wait 10 minutes for people who were getting their photograph taken with Tony, because that was such a big night for the Spanish speaking community. And it really shows you, and I put my arm around him and I said, Tony, this is a testament tonight to local broadcasting. I said, look at this community that you engage with, and what you have created with these people, and how much your station means to the community. So it is an amazing thing that you see the impact of radio. That was just one great example of it.
So gratifying to see that. It really was. I have one quick thing. I know we're running out of time here, but I had seen that there is an issue about taxing on existing taxes changing. I have to say, in context here, back in the days when I had been president of the ad club, even before I was president, we used to do so much to combine the broadcast and the radio, and broadcast and print, getting together, lobbying, grassroots lobbying to make sure that they didn't start taxing. And now I hear today that even parking is going to be taxed. What's the story that you have to address regarding changes to the existing advertising tax deductibility? Comment.
Yeah, so that's twofold. Number one is tax deductibility for advertisers. So if you are an advertiser, let's say you own a meat market or a fish store or a bicycle shop, when you advertise, that is a tax deduction for your business. That is something that we have not seen any indication that that is going to change. And that's something that we are still vigilant on, because as you know, the governments need money. And they only keep spending more. So that is something that we will fight to make sure that that advertising stays tax deductible. And the other thing is, we're seeing a lot of states introduce legislation to tax advertisers or advertising, for that matter. So that in addition to paying for an ad in the newspaper or a commercial on TV or radio, you would pay a sales tax on top of it. And you have a lot of states that are in a world of hurt. We have states in this country that are trying to balance a budget that is billions of dollars upside down. In Rhode Island, there was a digital advertising tax introduced most recently in the Senate. I went in and testified against that, even though there was going to be an out for radio advertising. They were targeting basically the Metas of the world, the Alphabets of the world, the Google and Facebook and those guys. But any tax on advertising is a drain on the economy. We all know that advertising drives business, and in anything that drives spending is good for all of us, because a thriving economy is very important. Everything is connected. So if you start to tax advertising, that's really going to have a drain on the community. And you look at who pays for that, where you know, a lot of times folks who introduce these taxes will say, well, we're going to put a stipulation in that they can't pass it along to the consumer, to the, you know, the person. So the person who has the bicycle store can't, you know, make it a surcharge, but they could still raise their prices. You know, there is, we've seen this with every kind of tax. It gets passed down to the consumer. So taxes on advertising of any type are not a good idea, and it's something that we'll continue to fight. And they're fighting it all over the country. There are places in Maryland it has been passed. They are still fighting it in courts.
I didn't know that. I knew it was going to rear its ugly head again. I mean, I remember fighting it, and I knew it would happen again because they're trying to tax everything that moves. I understand, but if they really are, they're going to kibosh the economy. Well, when you look at the tariffs that they're imposing, oh, just you'll absorb it. How much can that person who's manufacturing or sell? They can't. There comes a point when they can't.
The government doesn't have money unless we give it to them.
Exactly.
So we're the ones who are paying, right?
But if you don't give it to them, they put you in jail.
Right,
That's a different story. Oh my goodness.
That doesn't seem right.
It doesn't.
Don't we have any rights left at all?
We'll save that for another topic. Bill, this has been just so wonderful to have you with us. We can't thank you enough for sharing your information, and it's great just to talk with you again. We love it. Thank you so much for tuning in and for talking with us. And Rhode Island Broadcasters Association.org, is it REBA.org?
RIBroadcasters.com.
.com. Oh, not .org. Sorry. Thank you for correcting me with that, Bill. Sorry. That's good. I think that's probably a wrap for today. What do you think, Mr. Cass?
It's always a pleasure having a former boss of mine as a guest.
How about that?
He didn't have me long, but he had me for a period of time.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure talking to you guys. I'll come back anytime. Cass, you are a legend, my friend. So it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
My life is going to be
in my own mind. Oh,
sorry.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you all for tuning in to livingthegoodlifepodcast.com. I'm Deb Moraes. What's your
I'm
name?
Steve Cass, and he's Bill George.
And we're out. Thank you so much. Take care all. Signing off. Bye-bye.